My wife Debbie is a list maker. Every day she makes a list of what she's going to do and then she moves through her list. She's always been that way. Well, I don't know always, but as long as, well, since we've had kids, I'll put it that way. And a lot of it is when you got kids, even when they're a little bit older, you get interrupted a lot. So you kind of got to remember, okay, what are my goals for the day and the things I got to do? And so I get it. I'm not so much a list maker. I used when I was keeping regular office hours and you know sitting in a church study. I made lists daily, almost, well, more weekly to-dos, but anyway, lists. Well, Paul was kind of a list sort of guy, and he has this pretty strident list in 1 Timothy 1. He talks in verse 8, he said, we know the law is good if one uses it properly. And in order to use it properly, you got to know who the law was made for and who it was not made for. And so in verse 9, he says, okay, we also know that the law is made not for the righteous, but, and then he begins the list, for lawbreakers and rebels. You see, in one sense of the word, the law, any law is made, any just law, let me just put it that way, is made to protect the innocent from the guilty. The law is not made for the righteous, but for lawbreakers and rebels. Okay, in some ways, all of us are rebels. All of us push back against God's written, commanded will. All of us. All of us are kind of like that little 4-year-old kid in the hallway that stomps their foot and says, you're not the boss of me. That's in all of us. And there are some of that comes from the need to gain independence so that we can eventually grow to become interdependent. But the majority of it comes from a fallen nature. We have inherited a propensity, a proclivity towards selfishness. And I could spend a long time talking about where does that selfishness come from? How does it go back? How does it reflect itself? What's it look like in our normal daily lives? But I don't think I need to do that. Pretty much every thinking person can quickly and fairly easily see our selfishness. Well, we never finish trying to bend our own will and push our selfish person, that selfish self, backwards and let our unselfish person step forward. In fact, I have a friend who said, Christian growth and maturity comes down to this: growing and moving from selfishness to unselfish. All right. Rebels, the ungodly and sinful. Well, that pretty much that's everybody, isn't it? At some point or another, we're ungodly, meaning we don't have room for, time for, need for, interest in God, and sinful. All of us from time to time are like that, but that is not, for a follower of Jesus, we occasionally slip back into those old patterns, and sometimes we willfully go, but that is not what describes our lives. The unholy and irreligious. I tapped on this yesterday or last time, and the unholy, that's a term that we kind of throw around sometimes, I think. Unholy. it basically equals we stand against we stand against who God is. You see, his holiness is in my opinion, the two defining marks of God are his love. John wrote, remember in 1 John, God is love. If you want the description of love, you look at God. God is love. That's who he is. It's what he does, but it's the reason he does it is because it's who he is. A second attribute of God is that he is holy. When the elders and the angels and the redeemed fall before the throne of God, the book of Revelation, they cry out, holy, holy, holy. What is holy? Well, its literal meaning is separate. It's in a whole new separate category. It is above. It is beyond. It is not like the rest. We have an imputed holiness. And by that, I mean we have, according to Scripture, God has made us righteous because of his goodness, that we accessed his grace, that we connected with through faith. And only by virtue of that do we have his holiness imputed to us. Well, unholy really has to do with that that aspect of life is unimportant and irrelevant to us. I could go on and on, but I don't need to. And irreligious. Irreligious has to do with, again, this is not necessarily anti-religious. This is irreligious. And in a whole lot of ways, I think it describes prevailing popular culture today. Irreligious. Religion. And I'm not even talking about Christianity. I'm talking about religion as a whole. Especially organized religion is irrelevant. My youngest daughter, Jenny, when she was in Bible college, went for a summer to England, to Worcester, England, and helped a team as they were planting a church. And they went door to door. And one of the questions that they asked, they were just letting people in the community know that there was, we're starting a church. And one of the questions that they surveyed with was, what would you most appreciate in a church? And the responses, of course, were very interesting. But the dominating response that she told me was, the church? I don't know. I never think about the church. Well, see, England has been, in many, many ways, a post-Christian culture for, decades. We are not quite to that point in America, but the drift has become, instead of a drip, it's become a steady flow. We are, sometimes in my mind, I think of a canoe going down a river toward a waterfall, and we are getting dangerously close to the waterfall of just irreligious. I'm going to leave it at that because I could get so wrapped around that and spend 8, 10, 12 episodes on it. No reason. All right. For those who kill their fathers or mothers, holy smokes. That is, you talk about broken families. And for murderers, or if you're going to kill your father or mother, you're a murderer. But it goes beyond that. The number of murders that occur weekly, daily even, in America is alarming. And you can accuse me of whatever, but the statistics are clear. the number of murders that happen in our densely populated urban areas, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, are very much higher than any other municipalities, areas, however you want to group it. Murder is, some people, pundits, their belief is murders are up for several reasons. One is police presence is down. Two is the penalties have been almost removed. There are murderers who walk. Well, I don't know whether that's the whole thing, but I will say, yeah. And then the other part is there are cultures within our culture, subcultures, where violence and murder are part and parcel. Every murder that happens in these urban areas is not a gang murder, but a lot of them are. And in gang cultures, murder is just a tool. Oh boy. Wow. So I don't think I'm talking to murderers. Then he goes on in verse 10, for the sexually immoral. Sexual immorality has never not been a problem. I don't know at which point generationally sexual immorality became an issue somewhere down the line from Adam and Eve, where a man looked at a woman other than his mate and got turned on and decided, I think I'd like them too, or instead of. And you could probably almost make a case that until there was a law, until God gave his law, what could you say about sexual immorality? I mean, there was no standard. Well, there is a standard now. And the standard is God didn't stutter about this. The laws for sexual morality are abundantly clear. We're still bound by them. You see, the cross didn't cancel that. And I know you could accuse me of saying, well, some things it did cancel and others it didn't. No, the rightness of sexual morality has not changed. The sexually immoral. The pornography industry in America, the internet pornography industry in America, is one of the most lucrative of all industries. And it is capturing the hearts and minds of both young men and women, both adult men and women, aging adult men and women. It is a equal opportunity enemy. I feel very strongly about this. I counsel men who are struggling to get free from the talons of sexual immorality in the form of pornography and in fact sexual addiction. We are as human men, God put into us the desire for women, and he gave us the responsibility of governing that urge, that desire. There are many reasons why some men are more vulnerable to porn than others, and more vulnerable to sexual issue than other men. There's some reasons. It comes down to, though, who owns me? I've struggled in my own life. Now I realize part of the struggle was I only want what I want. Whether it's good or bad doesn't even come into the picture. It's do I want it? And that really, when you come down to it, every broken behavior that humans do essentially comes down to that. Now, next time, we're going to talk about an issue that, well, it's a big divide issue in the world today, and we're going to dive into it. I hope I get to connect with you then on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.